Hello. For those of you who don't know me, and that would be many of you, I am Edgemaster Psylocke. I like to experiment with high-risk, high-reward builds and strategies in games. I have over 70 hours on Psylocke and peaked Diamond in Season 0 with over 100 hours in Marvel Rivals. Susan Storm recently came out in Marvel Rivals, and word on the street is that she's weak. She even seemed boring in concept, but then I tried her and oh man, every other hero in this game has either come out strong or had some hidden tech no one knew about at first, so I decided to go read Richards on Susan and hit the lab to figure out what her elite one-shot combo is. She has some insanely fun, out-of-this-world mechanics no one else seems to be using, so strap in. I've been watching top 500 streamers lately and none of them have seemed to figure her out yet. It makes sense because Susan is a ranged hero. She fires orb projections that go out and return to her. Her psionic vortex can fly almost as far as the eye can see. Her force physics is great for making space or pulling other ranged heroes off of high ground. And her damage and healing are decent. She's a decent strategist. She even gets a small shield allies can stand next to regenerate that heals almost instantly and breaks nearly as quickly. Therein lies the issue though. The Marvel Rivals developers continue to impress upon us their honest agenda to switch the perception of strategists as not just supports. It's not just in name. Mantis can sedate and headshot you solo, Cloak can blind and rapidly take you down solo, Luna can freeze you, and Invisible Woman can bounce you harder than Iron Fist and get away cleaner than Psylocke. Even Mr. Fantastic has several abilities that make him extremely durable, even though he is not listed as a vanguard. Hybrids not only exist, but thrive between the roles of Marvel Rivals. So, wait, am I saying that Susan can one-shot opponents before they can react? That is exactly what I am saying. Now, with Susan's heals and standard damage only coming in at a decent level, you can't play her like every other strategist that just heal bots on the point. Her kit isn't meant for that. If you want to run her, I highly recommend having a main healer or two for the team. Susan has other responsibilities. She is a mom after all. Susan's invisible power lies in her melee attacks. With Agile Strike, you essentially get a mini force physics cast that can push enemies away, is much wider than your regular melee attack, and has longer range than your regular melee attack. This benefits Susan's attack patterns in a lot of ways that we will get into later. The combo goes like this. First, whether you're in the enemy's backline or your own, you're going to move across the battlefield invisibly until you find someone who isn't paying attention to you. Ideally, you want a squishy hero without mobility. The enemy Adam Warlock is going to become your best friend. But this combo should work on just about all strategists and most duelists who aren't being pocketed. Once you're in position and within range, you're going to primary fire and cancel with a melee. While your melee animation plays, your primary fire's ricochet mechanic will be coming back to you for 70 damage every swipe if you're comboing correctly and hitting both parts of the orb projection. Next, you're going to want to primary fire and melee cancel again, but this time, you will animation cancel the melee attack with your psionic vortex shift ability. Now on the third strike, immediately fire your primary, hit them with a third melee to send them flying with Agile Strike, and then instantly cast your E Force Physics before they land to pull them into you. Be sure that you've trained a lot with this combo, or you may just sit there canceling your E several times or throwing shields all over the place on your allies beyond your victim that don't even need it. You could also save your victim with a Force Physics push on accident. As a side note, I've gone into settings and tried to rebind the pull to something else, but it is so far always bound to your secondary fire button, which is default mouse button too. While all of that damage should be enough to kill any squishy hero below 300 health, enemy strategists exist and we're all human, so if they have any health remaining, finish them off with another primary melee combo, or if they're running, just fire away with primaries. Another common pitfall besides missing your primary fire is failing to reload. You have 10 shots, so that's 3 reliable rotations before you need to start thinking about it. Every 3 shots missed is 120 damage out the door. Assuming you are able to stay next to them, keep weaving in your melees to knock them around every 3 hits. There is no cooldown on this ability, so keep smacking them until they're dead. It will disrupt their own combat flow and put them out of position and force them to unreliably land their abilities. You can also keep them stuck in your team this way if they are caught out, or lock them into your psionic vortex. You could even shove them toward penny mines or out of cover. Get creative with it, you'll be using it a lot. If the tides of battle turn and you find you're the one caught out, hop away as quick as you can at an angle you think they won't damage you and disappear right under their noses. You should consider taking damage while hopping to be a death sentence. The nice thing about playing inside of your team is that your other healer can keep you alive if you do happen to get hit. If you're diving, you may very well be on your own and you're not going to kill anyone if you're outnumbered more than 2 to 1. For this particular clip, I tried to help my flanking Wanda and went out of position as she left me for dead. Don't do this. Just don't chase people in bad situations already. Your kit doesn't allow for that. Make bad situations for your enemies instead. If you can, stick with your flankers before they get themselves in a bad spot, but never waste your resources, including positioning, to chase an ally already in a bad spot. And if they're just dumb and run directly into the enemy's line of fire, nearly getting you killed in the process, it is completely okay to practice self-care. If you keep getting caught out, reassess your strategy and make sure your opponents aren't able to dedicate resources to you when you go in the next time. Consider letting your team start a fight before you go causing trouble in the enemy back line. Otherwise, hanging out with your team to prevent dives from invisibility is perfectly viable as well. You have an ambush kit, so play like an ambush predator. If you don't feel comfortable at this, heal botting is an option. You can still get some benefit to your team, but there are optimal ways to play this hero. The time it takes for you to get all of your health back is generally the time it takes for the enemy players to forget about you because, ideally, your allies are also still shooting at them. If they aren't, you need to either regroup or wait for the next opening when your enemies are distracted. As for the ult, I like to call it the babysitter. Susan Richards is a mom and she knows that sometimes mommy needs to blow off some steam. Once you drop your ult in a team fight, your team will have no reason to whine for heals or peels for at least 8 seconds, so that frees you up to go kick some ass. The nice thing about Invisible Boundary is that it also hides your enemies from their allies, so an enemy Mantis, for example, will have to walk inside of it and get slowed if she wants to cast her heal on anyone. If the enemy team doesn't have their own support ult, just go to town on her face and be ready to dodge her sedation with your double jump. If it hits, she still won't be able to kill you through your ult, so her best bet is to let mommy sleep. One side note is that if Jeff happens to swallow you while you're hopping with Veiled Step, it will be up again by the time his chewing duration ends, so you can just bounce out and start regenerating immediately, assuming you manage to dodge your way out of danger. Continuing with the analogy, Susan knows she may get overwhelmed from time to time, and the babysitter can come in clutch. While it's not ideal, sometimes it makes sense to call in a favor when your other options are expended. Whether you blew your cooldowns botching an assassination, or your team just instantly wiped before you could use it, dropping Invisible Boundary will give you an opportunity to tank just about all of the entire team's damage, and then disappear once more to go back to wrecking face once they become distracted. Unlike Psylocke, they can't just follow you until you reappear, so you have a lot more chances to get away cleanly. As a bonus note, going invisible breaks Punisher's passive marker on you too. I sometimes like to just stand still after running for a few seconds while the enemy is searching for me, so they believe I've already gotten too far away to hear my footsteps. Now, let's talk about synergies. Your best friend is probably going to be Captain America. He's going to want to be diving the backline constantly, and you have just the kit to go and pocket him. You have enough damage to go kill a squishy by yourself, but if you also have Captain America bashing in their teeth with his shield, things will go a lot more smoothly. Other heroes like Iron Fist, Psylocke, Wanda are all great to pair with Susan because they have backline target access, and they can usually get out cleanly just like you can. They are also all self-sufficient heroes that don't typically need a pocket, but having you there for the extra insurance just makes everything go smoothly. I'm still testing a lot of the Invisible Woman's battle patterns, but someone I can definitely say is a counter is Star-Lord. If he knows you're around, he can just sweep his 2 blasters across his field of vision to try to find you. He can also use his spin to win ability, which will automatically hit anything nearby him, and then you're as good as dead. You have to just jump away and hope for the best, or you can turn around and try to do your melee combo, but he's also able to block a lot of your damage and disruption with invincibility frames that he gets from his Dark Souls roll. All of that said, you can still get the drop on him if conditions are right. Traveling with a flank friend is also, again, never a bad idea in Marvel Rivals. Suddenly, this game got easy. I would say a lot of would-be counters are actually not very effective against Susan because ideally you're not sitting there heal botting. If you're sitting there heal botting on Susan, you're doing it wrong. You have a passive for a reason. You have a melee ability for a reason. You should be making use of both of these. If, for example, Logan wants to dive your backline, you could be standing there invisible. He doesn't know you're there. He can't grab you. You watch him go in, he jumps on Wanda, and before he can get real damage in, you just pull him off. He has no idea he's going into a 1v3 instead of a 1v1 or 1v2. And now, you and Dagger can just peel and heal for each other, pull him off, push him away, keep Wanda alive, and burst him down to his passive instantly. And then he has to decide if he's going to keep fighting for a kill while getting kicked down inside of your psionic vortex while you're throwing healing orbs through his skull. In fact, your vortex ability is really nice against divers because you can just throw it on yourself or a teammate and force the enemy to make a choice to keep pursuing the kill or leave. The more bloodthirsty a lone enemy hero is, the better for your KDA on Susan. Psionic Vortex is also really helpful for locking out a small choke point like a doorway while you wait for cooldowns in a close fight. Also, if you get into a bad skirmish and you have an ally nearby, which will ideally be often, you can always throw a shield on them and reposition with Veiled Step to start regenerating faster. If a skirmish is moving away from you, you aren't likely to keep up with your single mobility ability. It's often better to regroup with your other teammates or set up for a new lethal pick. Your biggest counters with this playstyle are going to be ranged heroes, especially if they can spam AoE abilities or fly. So if you're peeling divers off of your own backline, you're susceptible to Hawkeye, you're susceptible to Hela, you're susceptible to Storm, you're gonna hate Iron Man. He can just hold his beam at you and fire missiles at you. You suddenly go from living your best life, shoving dudes 4 times your size around, to 25 health and begging for your life. Remember, you have no self-heals unless you're invisible, and you're not invisible if you're being irradiated by a gamma ray. But you can pull him down and you can throw a vortex on him until he repositions. Be wary. The most important agenda for Susan Storm is to pick your battles. The invisibility gives you a lot of breathing room to assess the situation. Look for picks, look for allies that need peel, disrupt the enemy divers when they go in, disrupt the enemy strategists when they try to support their divers, and just overall be a menace. You should always remember that you're a disruptor first, a healer second, and a diver third. And that's a very close third. You need to know when to adapt to these situations, and getting a lot of playtime in on her is what will really help you figure this out. You'll want to be able to weigh when it gives more value to break invisibility or stay in it. Have you regenerated to full yet? Will your ally die if you don't heal him in a critical moment? Do you have enough sustain to prevent the next instance of damage coming in? Are you even able to hit the shot to heal them? Will the enemy Luna get away if you break stealth to save someone? Will you die if you break stealth? Even if you will die, does that mean you will pull aggro or get kills for a critical point capture? Consider your positioning and resources and imagine what it would mean if you suddenly weren't invisible. Rule number 1 with Susan Storm. If there are enemies inside of your team and you're close enough to engage with them, you should throw them out of your team. Think of your backline, the other healers, and anyone with them as your kids and let those motherly instincts kick in. Go in and shove them off. If a diver is in your front line, have fun playing ping pong between yourself and your vanguard. If I see someone out of position and my team is safe, I usually like to hold stealth until I see an enemy vanguard's defenses go down and then lay my one-shot combo on them to finish them off. If there's a sniper or any duelist really on a high point keeping you from exercising rule number 1 and they're hurting them kids, you find your way to his nest and snap all of his arrows. If there's a Hawkeye ulting your team, he'll be very loud and confident. Sneak around to the side, get in position to melee, bounce him around, kill him, and disappear. I would say you're one of Hawkeye's biggest counters because he can never see you until you want him to see you. The same thing goes for the Punisher. You can just walk straight up to him outside of his line of fire and then just decide to take him for a walk. The main counter to this is that either of these heroes get peeled, and in that case you're going into an outnumbered fight anyways, so make sure the enemies have other things to do before they go and help their ally. That way your team should get value in the fight even if they turn to kill you. 4 die here starting with their vanguards because both strategists had to look at me and Squirrel Girl turned to help. Susan's main playstyle revolves around being a strong, independent woman who can peel herself, get out of danger on her own, take care of others, and set up plays that grant a lot of benefit for her team. With this in mind, you should be setting up your own engagements and not playing by other people's playbooks. If you're caught out, get out. Call the babysitter, hop veiled step, knock people away from you, give yourself time to breathe, reassess the situation, and be a real-life strategist. If you're heal botting, you're a liability to your team, because the enemy can always see you, they can always target you, you're getting suboptimal value from your kit, and you're gonna have a bad time. Even if you're with your team, as long as no one is getting bursted or in critical values, let the Luna or the Jeff or the Mantis heal them. You can top them off when the threat is gone and the enemy is staggered, or when you have your veiled step again to reset invisibility. With decent abilities that help her augment the healing among your team, Susan should almost always be the secondary healer. She simply doesn't have the kit to reliably heal in every scenario. Once again, you are a disruptor first and a healer second. When you know your children are safe and healthy, you can go to work diving the backline. As soon as you hear that intruder on the ring camera though, rush back home and shove them off. Once you know things are safe at home again, go back to being a menace in the enemy ranks as you play paddle ball with their faces. You being passively invisible creates one of 3 scenarios. The enemy is wary of diving your team because they don't know if you're there. The enemy is wary of diving your team because they don't know if you're on their own backline. Or the enemy doesn't heed you and is surprised by you. Pop out and make them hate queuing up against you. Or be so deep in their heads that they're always firing in front of them or peeking over their shoulder at their own backline to see if they're getting dribbled like a basketball. It's a win in every scenario, so they have to have more resources available if they don't want to make mistakes against you. I hope you were able to learn some new techniques and theories with this guide, and if you live on the edge like me, consider subscribing. I'll leave you with one final question to think about. What would you do if you were invisible? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.
My kids fight harder.